Hey everyone, it's me. Just like in a prior episode, we are going to be talking through Miscarriage today in a lot of detail. So if that's not something that you're in a good spot to listen to or might be triggering for you, then we will see you at a later episode and you can stop here. Thanks. Welcome back to another episode of the Mama to Be Honest podcast. My name is Janaea. This is episode 11. I'm back. How are you guys? How's everybody doing? It's been a couple weeks. Thank you for the break. I had to take a much needed break, and I think the episode title is a little bit of a giveaway, but we're going to get a little real today. Anyway, it is a Thursday afternoon. I took today off for a couple of reasons. I volunteered at my kids' daycare today for Daycare Volunteer Day for a few hours in the morning, so that was really fun. And it's always fun to volunteer at my kids' daycare because they they kind of are like, what are you doing here? So they don't know whether to, play with their friends or come hang out with mom. But I'm pretty much there to help with whatever the teachers need. If they need to organize stuff, clean stuff, get some arts and crafts ready for the kids. So I'm just there to be a helper, and it was so much fun. So I took today off of work to go to Daycare Volunteer Day, but I also just needed a day to myself to get some things done around the house and run a couple of errands too. So it has been a nice, relaxing Thursday. I've got some time, and it was really just on my heart to get today's podcast episode recorded, because also this weekend I'm a little bit busy. My husband and I are celebrating our 6th wedding anniversary tomorrow, which is really exciting. So our anniversary is June 9th. It has been 6 years since we've been married, and it's kind of a surreal thought. It's 6 years has flown, but it also feels like we've been married for longer than that. I feel like many married people can probably relate to that. It's just been a wild ride, and 2 kids later, we are living life and loving life and just growing more deeply and differently in love with each other and learning more about each other. I think that's something I never really expected. Which is kind of weird to say, but you really continue to get to know your partner, your husband, your wife, as you continue to live life with them and experience new things together with them and be co-accountable for things together. So it's really been, he is just the most wonderful person, and I'm so lucky to have him as my husband and to live life with him. So tomorrow we're just going on a nice romantic dinner date, and hopefully we'll be able to get off of work a little early and spend a little bit of the afternoon together too. But my mother-in-law is coming over tomorrow to watch the kids so we can have a night out together, and I'm just really looking forward to it. I'm trying to think of any other personal updates I have. Maybe, what am I watching these days? Maybe that's interesting. So I am really into this show called Yellow Jackets. Every time I ask if someone watches the show, the answer is usually no. Luckily, one of my best friends is also as obsessed with the show as I am. So the second season came out recently, and I'm slowly making my way through the second season. I'm trying my best to savor each episode and really pay attention and not be on my phone because the show is so good. I am not usually into sci-fi or spiritual demonic type of shows. This definitely has some undertones, but I think the fact that it's more of a mystery type of show, is why I love it so much. I am a total murder mystery type of gal. The only shows I watch outside of this one are like reruns of Law and Order SVU or Law and Order and mystery documentaries on Netflix. So this has been a nice change of pace. So if you haven't checked out Yellow Jackets, I highly recommend you check it out. It's about this team of girls who play on a soccer team together in the 90s, and they crash in this remote forest in the Canadian wilderness. And it's about how some of them made it out alive, and it kind of goes back and forth between the time that they crashed and present day. And so you're kind of piecing things together, but it is really interesting. And it's very like Lord of the Flies-esque, if you are familiar with that plot. So really interesting. So if you're into stuff like that, check it out. It's a good show. I have been noticeably absent, or at least not as busy on the socials recently, and I shared on my Instagram earlier this week kind of the reason why. And we have just been going through a pretty rough last few weeks. So I recently miscarried. I was about 6 weeks pregnant, or at least that's how long I was measuring. So just having to go through that has been really, really tough. And I think the fact that it was so tough caught me by surprise and really made it that much worse. I recorded an episode about miscarriage and trying to conceive and pregnancy loss early on, probably, I think it was episode 2 or 3. But just going into like my miscarriage experience and why I think it would happen again. It's so interesting because I was right. It happened again. But I also talked about why I think I wouldn't, like why I was expecting it, but in a more of a confident way. Like, oh, I know what to expect. I know kind of the mental, physical piece of what to expect from miscarriage. I've been through it 3 times already. So when the day comes where it happens again, I think I'm really gonna be able to brush it off and handle it like a champ. And I think I went into that thought process with confidence, and I don't think that's a bad thing, but just the way that this 4th pregnancy loss had and is still hitting me, it really kind of knocked the wind out of me and threw something at me that I really didn't expect to. It's definitely different than the prior 3. And I'm not saying that miscarriage gets any easier. Clearly it does not, because I'm going through it right now. It is much different than the prior 3 that I've had. And when I shared earlier this week, kind of my thoughts around that, I am definitely in a better place than I was at that moment. But it's definitely dragging on a bit in terms of just the mental drain, and physically too. Physically, it's been a little bit different this time around. So today I want to spend the time just kind of talking about my experience. And, I always go back and forth on talking about things that are so personal to me. But when it comes to pregnancy loss, I feel like the more I talk about it, not only does it help me, like it really, really helps me to talk about it and to put my really dark and sad thoughts out loud and talk through them and talk through my thoughts and talk through my logic and my non-logic, and just putting thoughts into words is really cathartic for me. More importantly, I feel like it helps other people, because it is a very miscarriage and pregnancy loss is still taboo. Like point blank, it's still taboo. It sucks that it's still taboo. So the fact that it helps me, and the fact that it maybe my experiences or my testimonies, as well as those of other women, can help others. Like, if it's not uncomfortable for me to talk about, but even if it was, I feel so compelled to just share my experience and to normalize it, because it really is, it is a shitty thing to go through. And I hate feeling isolated or alone or ashamed of these experiences. And so I feel like talking about them and normalizing them will only make that lessen or diminish in terms of the shame or the lack of normalcy. Every time I read about someone's miscarriage experience, I'm like, there's someone out there going through the exact same thing. There are hundreds and thousands of other women that have gone through the exact same thing. I feel very vulnerable because I'm still, kind of, it's coming and going in waves in my thoughts and my feelings, but I really feel compelled to talk about it now while I'm still kind of going through, the midst of this fourth pregnancy loss. I think that makes it that more meaningful. So I want to start with, I guess, just from the beginning of this pregnancy loss. So I got my birth control taken out in January. My husband and I are very set on having a third baby. We want to continue to grow our family. And we hadn't really set a time limit on it or anything. We are not just like, okay, we want to be pregnant by this day and this time. But I got my birth control taken out in January. And the reason I did is because I just kind of assumed that my body was going to take some time to, re-regulate itself and get back to normal and get back onto my cycles and start understanding my cycles again. It's really a lot of work to understand and track your cycles. There are a lot of good apps out there that I use the Flow app to track my cycles and to kind of understand and predict when I ovulate, how long my cycles are. That app has really been helpful for me. But again, we didn't really go into it saying like, oh, we want to be pregnant by this date or this month, and so we're gonna do this. No, I really just wanted to get my body off of birth control and it back into like a regulated state where I'm, not relying on birth control. So we didn't really have, an idea of when we wanted to get pregnant. We just were set on the fact that we did. So, and we still do. So, we were kind of set on, if it happens at any time, that's great. But we're also fully expecting it to take a while because you never know. And I'm also getting older. I'm 31. So as you kind of near, get into your 30s, it's generally like I'm expecting to wait longer with every next baby that I have, hopefully. So going into this with no expectations on timing, but we were pretty set on getting the process started at least. So I got my birth control taken out earlier this year. Started tracking my cycles, getting to know my body again. And I think I had 3 full cycles before becoming pregnant. I remember it's so funny when you start hyper tracking or hyper fixating on your cycles, you always know like what your OB is going to ask you is like, what's the first day of your last period? So the first day of my last period before becoming pregnant was early April. So it was like April 5th or something. And my ovulation window that happened after that period, I became pregnant. And I didn't know, there's always like that 2-week, 3-week waiting period of knowing if you've conceived or if if you've got a positive pregnancy test. But I didn't even know I was pregnant until right around my birthday. So it was my birthday week when I had realized, oh, I think I'm late. I think I'm late on my period. And my cycles, historically and even after getting off of birth control this time around, my cycles have historically been very long, like on the longer end. So on the 31, 32 day range. I'm definitely not a 28-day cycle girly. My cycles tend to be very long. So it was around like the 6 week mark after my last period ended that I was like, oh, I think I'm late. Let me check my app. My app indeed said that I was late. And so it was around my birthday that I took a pregnancy test and it was positive. And I did start feeling, those early pregnancy symptoms. I felt really, really bloated. I didn't have any kind of nausea yet, but I was really tired, really bloated. I would get some sensitivity in my breasts, and so I was like, okay, if it walks like a duck and it's quacking like a duck, then I'm pregnant. And so it was right around my birthday that we found out that I was pregnant, and so I had measured how long I might have been pregnant. I think around that time I was 5 or 6 weeks pregnant, and so got the prenatal appointment scheduled. And I don't know how it is for other medical providers or health providers, but your first prenatal appointment or your first ultrasound isn't usually until after the 6 week mark. And so mine was scheduled for around the 7 week mark. They got me in pretty quickly. And so my husband and I were gearing up for our first ultrasound appointment. And I think the part that makes me a little bit sad is we also had our daughter with us that day. So Jade was with us for our first prenatal appointment, and because she was sick and we couldn't take her to school. And so we got to the first appointment really excited. I had no signs at that point, from the time we had found out that we were pregnant up until the prenatal appointment. I had no signs of miscarriage, no pain, just a lot of the traditional pregnancy symptoms. No nausea yet, but it would start to pick up. But no spotting, no severe pain, nothing that indicated that there was a miscarriage. And so I went to our prenatal appointment. My husband was with me, Jade was with me, and they did that early on. They do what's called a transvaginal ultrasound. So instead of putting the jelly on your belly, they kind of probe your insides with like an ultrasound probe inside your vagina to get a good look at your uterus to see what's going on and to confirm if there's a pregnancy there. And so, they asked questions on how far along did I think I was, when was the first day of my last period, just so they could get a good estimate on gestational age. Asked all the questions, the ultrasound started, and once they got the probe inside of me, there was nothing there. So it was just and it's always so hard. I always don't know what to expect when I see these things. I'm like, I don't even know what I'm looking at. So I went into it thinking like, okay, let's find the little nugget. Let's find the little bean guy in there. And it was just a dark circle. And the first thing that the OB asked me, my OB asked me is, do you have generally like very long cycles, or are you sure? How sure are you on your period dates? And I was like, well, I'm pretty sure. I've been tracking it, but I do tend to have longer cycles. And so she was like, that might explain it, because right now I don't see, I don't see any embryo. I don't see a yolk sac. I see a little faint line that might show that there's a yolk sac forming or a fetal pole forming, but there's nothing here clearly except for a gestational sac. So it could just be very, very early on. So no need to worry. There's, I based on everything that you've told me, it sounds like things are progressing, but I think you might be on the earlier side, maybe around 6 weeks, which was interesting to me because I feel like I had kind of known my cycles to a T, but at the same time, I don't want to over-engineer my thoughts and, trust the doctor and trust their expertise. But once I heard that, once I saw that, it really kind of just started going downhill from there, in terms of my thoughts and just kind of spiraling on the inside. So after after the ultrasound was done, she said, we're going to repeat the ultrasound in a week because we can't rule out an unviable pregnancy, or that there's an abnormal pregnancy growing. She says she doesn't see any signs of an ectopic pregnancy, so that was also something that she had looked at and screened for, because there was nothing in the gestational sac. So it was just, at that point, an empty gestational sac, and she had thought that maybe it was a bit on the earlier end, and that the next time that I come back, so a week later, that we would see a fetal pole and a yolk sac, which is essentially like the pre-placenta, or what supplies the embryo with all the important stuff until the placenta takes over. So after leaving that appointment, I always kind of try my best to not freak out in front of my husband, but I was like dying on the inside. I was really just like, oh gosh, like I already know myself. I'm going to consult Dr. Google and see what other women have been through, just seeking answers to something I have no control over. And even now I'm just kind of like, what did I do wrong? And, at that point there was no confirmed miscarriage, but the week between that ultrasound and the follow-up ultrasound just crawled. As you can imagine, if you are someone that does not like not being in control or not knowing outcomes or treading life with uncertainty, it was just the excruciating week. I think that I handled it as best as I could and was really open with my husband after kind of having that solo time to myself. But the week in between those two ultrasounds was really, really hard, because all I'm thinking about is whether there's a miscarriage happening, or if there will be a miscarriage between the time I go back to the doctor. But I think I don't know if it was the right approach for me, but I really kind of just started preparing myself for bad news, just so that, the actual news, if I had gotten too hopeful, wouldn't land as hard. So the week in between my second ultrasound and my first was just a lot of preparing for what was going to happen and what ultimately happened. So I kind of had come to my own conclusion, and I think I came to the right one, and there's really no way to know for sure, but I had come to the conclusion after a very long week that it just is a pregnancy that didn't form correctly, and my body is just not recognizing that. But I would go back and forth though during that week of, well, I'm experiencing symptoms, and I was experiencing crazy symptoms. The nausea only got worse. The nausea picked up after that appointment, and it only got worse. And I'm just like, man, if this nausea is picking up, then it's got to be a viable pregnancy. Like there can't be nothing there. And I'm just like sick all day, every day. And it wouldn't let up. It wasn't even just morning sickness. It was afternoon, mid-afternoon, late night, just feeling so miserable and nauseous. And so I would kind of go back and forth between like, oh, like maybe I should be more hopeful than I'm being, or, with what I had been researching, particularly around like a blighted ovum, where your body is essentially just growing a pregnancy where an embryo has not grown. So in the many articles I have read during these past few weeks, I learned that your body could essentially fertilize an egg at the point of conception, and it implants into the uterus, but that fertilized egg never grows into an embryo, despite the fact that a gestational sac grows, a placenta grows, but it's not supplying anything, and your body is just kind of waiting to catch up with itself. And so that's kind of what I was preparing myself for, while also, going back and forth between the fact that it very well could be that nothing is wrong. And so we had got to the following week, and this was last week, and we had our follow-up ultrasound. And I think what had given me a little hope while I was still kind of expecting the worst was that I had experienced no bleeding. There was no bleeding. There wasn't any severe cramping or pain or signs of miscarriage leading up to the second ultrasound. And so part of me was hoping that I would miscarry in that week, between the first and the second ultrasound, but nothing had happened. And so I went into the second ultrasound being like, yeah, nothing's happened. Just kind of updating my OB on the prior week. And she was like, yeah, let's take a look. I kind of fully expect that we'll see something there, especially if your nausea has been picking up and, it hasn't let up and you haven't had any other symptoms that indicate a miscarriage has happened. And so she performed the ultrasound again. She got out the probe, and when the image got up onto the machine, I just kind of saw from there that nothing had changed. So it was still black. Nothing was there. Nothing had progressed. She measured the gestational sac compared to the week before, and the size of the sac had not changed, which is also an indicator that the pregnancy has failed. Everything should be growing at this, days and weeks. Between 1 week and the other, there should be growth, and there was zero growth. Nothing had changed. It was just a gestational sac that was measuring at about 6 weeks. There was no embryo, no fetal pole, no yolk sac. It was just a black sac. And at that point, I just felt like, well, it wasn't shocking to me, and it still isn't shocking to me, but it was just like really disappointing, and I think just so frustrating because I was so miserable, like miserably nauseous, and so it kind of just felt like my body is making me suffer for nothing. This is pointless. Like, this is stupid. This feels so unfair that I'm just kind of like having to carry around a failed pregnancy, like carry around failure. And I think that is still kind of what's sticking with me. And I want to get out of that mindset so bad, because it's not anything it's no reflection of the things that I have done or anything that I did. It's just something that happens when you're trying to get pregnant. And just the fact that it has such an impact to your body is I think what made me angry after that point. So from there, I was like, okay, what are my options? Because the last thing, I was just set at that time. The last thing I want to do is just continue to feel this way, continue to feel like there is no successful pregnancy inside of me, and I don't want this feeling anymore. And I want to be reset. I want to be able to know that we can try again eventually. And so the fact that my body wasn't triggering itself to let go or miscarry was really what angered and what angers me. And so my doctor then kind of gave me, okay, here are the options you have. There's expectant management, which is what I just described. So waiting for your body to do what it's going to do, waiting for your body to recognize that you're not pregnant and miscarry on its own. The risks in that, you don't know how long that's going to be. I didn't know how long that's going to be. The fact that there was and were no signs of it kind of knowing that anything has happened was really unbearable for me. And I was like, that's not the option I'm picking. But the other two options weren't as weren't attractive to me either. So there's the medication route. So there's, managing your miscarriage at home with medication. So it's a blend of medications that stops the pregnancy from growing, even though that wasn't really something that I needed to do. And then there's another medication that softens your cervix and pretty much triggers it to expel the pregnancy, and you can manage that at home. The third option was a surgical method, so the dilation and curettage method. Basically, it's the most invasive method, but it's also the most efficient method. So your OBGYN would, soften my cervix and then, manage the miscarriage with the tools that they have. It would take around 5 or 10 minutes to do. So really efficient, really kind of like, if you want to get it over with, that's the option that you can go with. But in one of my prior miscarriages, I did have a DNC, and these are all really personal choices. I don't think there's a wrong choice, but in the research that I have done for myself, having multiple DNCs can pose a risk to future fertility. And so, I don't know just how data backed that is, or, to what extent that is true, but that was kind of the basis of my decision to pursue the medical management at home. And the fact that my pregnancy hadn't progressed past 6 weeks, at least it's what it looked like on the screen, means that it wouldn't be as painful as some women's experiences with medically managing miscarriage at home. But that's still it still was a sucky decision to make, because all three of those decisions I didn't want to have to make. And the fact that I had to make that choice between the three options also angered me a bit, because it's kind of one of those things where I'm trying so hard to have the best outcome, and the outcome that I didn't want is happening, and now I have to think through how I want to push past this outcome. And it really just sucked to have to think through all the options, and each option has a risk. The longer I wait to kind of carry around a failed pregnancy could have risks to naturally miscarrying, there are risks to medically managing at home and the side effects, and then there are risks to the invasive route, the surgical route. So it was just an awful couple of days to make that decision, but I ultimately decided to manage things medically at home. And so what that looked like was I had to schedule a follow-up appointment to get the medication. It's a combination of 2 medications that you take when you medically manage miscarriage. You take first a mifepristone pill in the doctor's office. Literally, you take it in front of your doctor, and that pill effectively ends your pregnancy. And it's kind of a weird thing to say, because my pregnancy was already failed, but that was just the first pill that you take to make sure that there's no growth. And so maybe the gestational sac was still growing, maybe the placenta was still growing, who knows, but that was the first pill that makes the subsequent pills more effective at doing their job when you take the next set of pills 24 to 48 hours later. So the next set of pills are kind of the what I call the big scary pills. So the next set of pills, which you take at home 24 to 48 hours after the first pill of mifepristone, are two sets of misoprostol pills, and you put 2 in each cheek, between your cheek and the gums. This medication is also used in medically managed abortions that you do at home. So it's the same medication. It does the same thing. But in my case, this was to manage a miscarriage of a failed pregnancy. And so kind of preparing for that, I think there was a lot of anxiety for me as well, because I had read about, you just read all the horror stories online. And it's something that I'm very guilty of doing in every situation that has medical implications. So was that healthy for me? Probably not, but I think that's just how I manage, like, knowing potential outcomes, despite the fact that they were not accurate, like comparable to my situation. They just weren't. So I did a lot of doctor Googling in in the 36 hours leading up. I chose to manage my miscarriage at home, and we timed it so that my husband could watch the kids while I essentially was upstairs miscarrying for all of Sunday. So I picked up a couple things to manage through my miscarriage, and I apologize because a lot of this is TMI, and it's gonna get a little TMI. I picked up a heating pad, and I picked up pads, and they also prescribed me really strong ibuprofen and anti-nausea medication, because some side effects of the misoprostol as well is nausea. And I was like, yeah, just give me everything. Give me everything that I need to guarantee that I will be as least miserable as possible during this process. There really is no telling how long the pills are going to take to, kind of trigger your cervix opening and the process kind of taking its course. But they generally told me it's within the realm of like 2 to 8 hours. And it ended up being on the longer end for me. So I took the misoprostol really, really early in the morning because I wanted it to kind of just start doing its job. I popped an ibuprofen. I popped an anti-nausea. I got my heating pad ready. I got my yellow jackets ready on the TV. I was just ready to kind of accept that this is happening, and this is the only way to get my body back to its starting point, to continue to continue my journey on wanting to grow our family, to have another baby. So I think what really disappointed me about this miscarriage was that it was kind of thrown in my face that I was not expecting a very likable alternative to what I expected to happen. Despite having 3 miscarriages before this one, I kind of was under the impression that I had been through it all, and like I just kind of felt invincible, and that I had been through every type of miscarriage experience. It's just a very humbling reminder that no, I haven't, and no, I am not a superhero, and yes, I am fragile, and yes, I am vulnerable, and yes, that is okay. And it just like reminded me that there are so many different types of pregnancy loss, and so many types that I can't fathom having to go through, but they are very possible. And that it's not my fault, even though there is like this weird shame that like is associated with all of these feelings and this really kind of dark mental state. Like you feel kind of ashamed of what is happening, and feeling kind of responsible for housing something that just didn't work. So after taking the pills, the pain wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. There were some moments where I really felt kind of like it's a painful contraction, but it was definitely more moderate than severe. And I hear that's because it gets more severe the further along you are. And I think the fact that even though I thought I was more like 8 or 9 weeks, my pregnancy stopped around the 6 week mark. And so I think that ultimately made the medication be more successful. I didn't have any hemorrhaging. I didn't have any like massive clotting, or, there was obviously like you pass tissue, and that's to be expected, but I didn't have any of the crazy side effects that I had read about, which was, like shooting a fever or chills or shivering, or I didn't have much nausea, and I hope I maybe the medication helped that, or like the anti-nausea medication, but it all kind of went as expected. It felt like what my body naturally did during my second miscarriage. So that, I think that was kind of a relief that it, like, no major horror story happened with managing medically at home. When the Sunday was over, I felt immense relief. It's taken a few days for the miscarriage to fully take its course, and I had a follow up with my doctor, and she said that that's pretty normal. Like, the bleeding in the miscarriage process can happen over the course of a week or 2 weeks, but things should be kind of pairing off, and then you're kind of back to square one. You're reset, and so I did feel at the end of that Sunday, so last Sunday, that I felt that like that sense of relief that, okay, like the hard part is mostly over, like checking myself, like talking to Maurice about this, and talking through my feelings, but I think the fact that it's just the physical piece of this miscarriage that was so new for me. The term is missed miscarriage. So the fact that my body didn't recognize that I had a failed pregnancy is what they call a missed miscarriage. So there are a lot of different types of miscarriages, like a partial miscarriage, a threatened miscarriage, an incomplete miscarriage. So this was a missed miscarriage, which I think is a really interesting name. So, and like this type of miscarriage, I think, is what threw me for a loop, and what really made it confusing and unfair. And all of it, all types of pregnancy loss is unfair. But I think me, under the assumption that I had done it all already, made this a bit harder than I expected it to be. So I am doing much better. I don't want this to come across as like I am in this really bad depressive state. I think I'm feeling more relief. I'm feeling like I get a second chance to kind of do it again. I don't know when that's going to be. That was another follow-up question that I had for my doctor, is how soon can we try again? How soon is my body going to be ready? Is it unhealthy if we try again? If we decide to try again ASAP, is that unhealthy? Is that going to only trigger another miscarriage to happen? And so like, I think I am trying to recognize when I'm being a bit more self-deprecating than I want to. I want to be in a healthy state of mind and a healthy physical state before we start trying again, and not just to kind of like prove that I can do it. Like, I don't want that. Like, I want to be able to grow my family for the same reasons that we wanted to back in January, and we still do. But I don't want this miscarriage to be like the motivating factor for wanting to try again so soon. So I don't know what the right time is going to be for us to try again, but the doctor's response to my question was, there's new data that suggests that it really doesn't matter how long you wait, while some doctors would say 3 to 6 cycles. And she generally disagreed with that and said it really makes no difference how long you wait. Like, you're going to ovulate after your miscarriage is done, and you're going to start a new cycle. So she didn't really give me an answer. She said it's really up to us, and when we feel like we're ready and we feel healed, when I feel healed emotionally and physically, of course. So I don't know what our plan is at this point, but it has been a really exhausting last few weeks. I am so glad that it is mostly at the tail end of everything. I am going to use this time less as a here's my advice to managing pregnancy loss and fertility issues. No, this is I am here kind of on my knees, like asking for God to comfort me and hold me and remind me that none of this is in my timing. It is all in His right timing. And it's been a really hard thing to remind myself because I get angry at God in these moments and I turn away from Him, and I try my best to understand that He is here to comfort me in these really tough moments where I feel like a failure. So it's been tough spiritually to manage through this as well. But I really just hope that hearing this experience in the moment that it's happening, and knowing that all women, all hopeful mothers, all grieving mothers have every kind of experience that you are probably going through too, and you have someone to share that with. I feel really compelled, and I want to be that, that sister that you have if you need someone to draw experience from, and know that it's not a perfect journey, and we feel drawn and desired to be mothers, to be parents, and this shit is not fair sometimes, right? There's a lot of guilt that I feel too, at the same time, because I know a lot of women and really close friends that are going through really unfair, way more unfair issues with fertility and trying to conceive and IVF, and it's like those are experiences that I may never know, and the fact that they're willing to share those with me make me feel that I'm not alone in my own experiences. So yeah, there is a level of guilt here as well, and kind of being upfront with this pregnancy loss, especially since I have two beautiful kids that are the result of very healthy pregnancies that I've been able to carry through to delivery. But there's also, like, I have got to remind myself, and I've been reminded by my sisters and my really close friends, that your experience, your loss, your pain is no less valid than others. And so if you are experiencing the similar type of guilt, or feeling like you're not enough, yes, you are, and yes, I am. And anyway, gosh, this is gonna be a really interesting episode to listen to, and I'm so sorry. Gosh, I really I don't know who's gonna end up listening to this, but I hope that my experience with my fourth pregnancy loss has been helpful for you. If you have been through a similar experience, or are going through one, or you're thinking about trying to conceive, or you want to become pregnant, and I hope that this is helpful or in service in some kind of way. I know I'm going to be okay. I am going to be fine. I'm also trying to take responsibility for getting myself back in a really good spot mentally. It is so easy for me to kind of fall into bad habits. So not waking up early, not eating correctly, not going for a walk, not grounding myself, not getting sunshine. Like those are all things that are very doable and controllable in that I can do every day within my own control. And so those are things that I need to be on top of myself with. And I know that those are only going to accelerate me feeling back to 100%, back to being ready to, start trying to grow our family again. So I'm getting there. It's one day at a time. And I just want to thank you for listening and for making a space for these types of experiences. This is not something that is easy for any woman to share. And I admire everyone that has been sending messages and kind words and have even shared their own experiences or even said that they've been through something similar, because it just gives me so much support. It gives other women so much support. So thank you so much for the kind words, the support, the love, the light. I really, really appreciate it. But anywho, I am steadily getting back onto the socials regularly. I've got some good filming going this week with some recipes and some vlogs that I want to share. So it's been nice getting myself back into the routine. So this next week, we are going to be kicking off our giveaway. I know it's been kind of slow rolling, understandably, but we are nearing the 1,000 follower mark. It has been crawling. I feel like it's been intentionally crawling with the Instagram followers. But once we hit that 1,000 follower mark, I'm going to be announcing the Mama to Be Honest 1,000 follower giveaway. And we have a really great collection of gifts that we're going to be giving away as part of that giveaway. So if you've been listening to the last couple of episodes, I've been dropping little giveaway hints, little giveaway words at the end of each episode that you can use for more entry codes in the giveaway when we kick that off. So I'm going to be doing that for this episode as well. So if you got the other two codes, wonderful. But the secret giveaway word for this week is light, LIGHT, light. So keep that one along with your other two that you've listened to from episode 10 and 9. And once that giveaway kicks off, you will have some extra entries for our 1K giveaway. I want to thank you so much for listening in this week and for bearing with me as we kind of go through a tough couple of weeks. Thank you so much for everyone who reached out and shared such kind words. It really means more to me than you know. Thank you for your prayers, your kindness, and just to all of my friends and sisters and folks that have just supported my content and all of the stuff that we've got going. So thank you so much. I've gotten a lot of really great podcast episode recommendations from you guys, but if you have anything that's on your mind or you want to chat through, just send me a quick message. If you've got any ideas for topics or an AMA, just let me know and we will get that running. So thank you. Love you guys. Talk to you later. Bye.